What if the man who gave the world When Harry Met Sally was living a double life worthy of a Hollywood thriller? What if behind the warm fatherly smile, the activist speeches, and the red carpet charm, Rob Reiner, the beloved director, the Hollywood patriarch, was hiding a truth so big, so dangerous, it tore his entire family apart the moment he took his last breath? You're about to step inside a story no one saw coming. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But everyone should have. It begins not on a movie set, but inside a crime scene. A Brentwood mansion, blood on polished hardwood floors. Two bodies, Rob Reiner, 78, and his wife Michelle, 70, found brutally stabbed to death in their $13.5 million estate. And the person who found them, their youngest daughter, Romy, 27 years old, pale, shaking, screaming. But it wasn't just the horror of the murders that stunned investigators. It was what Romy reportedly told the 911 dispatcher. There's someone dangerous in the house. Someone who should be a suspect. Her voice was trembling, but there was a strange calm in what she said next. My brother lives in the guest house. And that's when everything changed. Let's be honest. We all think we know the people we admire. We think their families are just like us, only more glamorous. We watch them at award shows, read their political tweets, laugh at their old sitcom reruns. But when the cameras cut off and the estate gates close, what happens behind those manicured hedges? What if I told you that Rob Reiner, yes, the same man who directed The Princess Bride, the same man who marched with Martin Sheen, the same man who sat beside his famous father Carl Reiner at dozens of charity galas, might have been living a double life. Not just a few secrets. Not just old skeletons. A whole other family. In Europe, a secret daughter, and wire transfers that trace back decades. And it's not just internet speculation. Tracy Reiner, his eldest daughter, the one he raised after marrying Penny Marshall, is finally speaking out. And what she's revealing now could unravel everything you thought you knew about her father. According to close sources, Tracy told investigators she suspected for years that her father was hiding something. Not just guilt. Not just favoritism, but a literal second life. Allegedly, she even hired private investigators, quietly, after seeing something in her father's old storage unit that didn't make sense. A photo, a woman she didn't recognize, a child who looked familiar. But the deeper she dug, the more dangerous it got. Because then, the murders happened. Now you might be wondering, wait, wasn't Rob Reiner just that friendly liberal filmmaker? Didn't he raise kids, speak out against Trump, support mental health causes? Yes. He did all of that. And that's exactly what makes this story so disturbing. Because good men don't usually leave behind two wills. They don't secretly wire money to a villa in France. And they don't get murdered alongside their wives in a luxury home with security cameras mysteriously turned off. And what about Nick Reiner, their troubled son, former screenwriter, recovering addict? He'd been living in the guest house. Some said he was getting better. Others said he was a ticking time bomb. But no one expected this. He was arrested the night of the murders, charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide. And according to preliminary reports, he wasn't cooperative. But here's where the story twists. Because sources close to the family claim, Nick was protecting someone. Someone his father feared. Someone connected to that secret life in Europe. Let's talk about motive. Was this just a tragic case of mental illness spiraling into violence? Or was something else, something far more deliberate at play? Let's rewind. For months before the murder, Rob Reiner reportedly met with a high-profile estate attorney. Not just any attorney, but the same man who represented celebrities trying to hide things in offshore trusts. Why? What did Rob know was coming? And why did his wife Michelle tell a close friend weeks later, "I'm done pretending. He's not who the world thinks he is, and I can't do this anymore." Chilling, right? But it gets worse. After the murders, police found a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside were letters, old, yellowed with time, written in French, bank statements, photos, a birth certificate for a girl born in Belgium, a girl with Rob Reiner listed as the father. Tracy Reiner isn't holding back anymore. She's done protecting the legacy. She's done living in her mother's shadow. And what she's revealing is pulling Jake and Romy into a storm they never asked for. Jake, the steady news anchor, broke down live on air. Romy hasn't spoken publicly since the murders, but sources say her private testimony stunned even prosecutors. And then there's Elise, a woman in her late 20s, living in Brussels, claiming she is Rob Reiner's daughter, born from an affair with a French artist he met while scouting locations in Cannes during the 90s. She has DNA evidence, a handwritten note signed Daddy, and a painting of a little girl holding Rob's hand on a beach. So how much of this did Rob's family really know? How much were they hiding? And could this secret family, this buried truth, be connected to the night he and Michelle were murdered? Or worse, was someone trying to silence him before the truth came out? We are diving into this story like never before, because this isn't just about murder. This is about what happens when the truth finally refuses to stay buried. It's about children confronting the man behind the myth. It's about a legacy cracking at its foundation. And it's about secrets coming back with blood on their hands. But we're just getting started, because what Tracy told investigators in a private interview, the one not released to the public, includes a phrase that could change the entire case. She said, "He always said his greatest role was being a father. But I think he was playing a character the whole time." What did she mean by that? And how far back does this double life go? What did Rob Reiner really want to keep hidden? Because what comes next, no one saw coming. Did Rob Reiner know he was going to die that night? That's the question investigators kept circling around. It wasn't just the brutality of the scene, it was the precision, the eerie quiet, the way the alarms had been disabled from inside the house. It didn't feel random. It felt orchestrated. And when the responding officers walked into that Brentwood estate on the night of December 14th, they weren't stepping into a house. They were stepping onto a stage, a final act, one drenched in blood and betrayal. The call came in at 9:37 p.m. A female voice, panicked, breathy. "This is Romy Reiner," she said, voice cracking. I think they're dead. My parents. There's blood, it's everywhere." There was a pause. Then she added something that would be replayed 100 times in the days that followed. "My brother's here. He was in the guest house. He's dangerous. You need to come." 8 minutes later, LAPD arrived on the scene. Lights off. No visible sign of forced entry, but the front door, unlocked. Odd, given that the Reiner estate was fitted with one of the most expensive private security systems in Los Angeles. A system that should have alerted them the second anyone entered unannounced. So why didn't it? Let's rewind just a bit. What do we know about that evening? From Romy's statement and corroborating texts to a friend, here's what allegedly unfolded. At around 8:15 p.m., Romy arrived to drop off a few Christmas decorations. Her parents, according to her texts, were planning a quiet evening. Rob was watching a screener for an upcoming documentary he was producing. Michelle was in the kitchen, making tea. It was supposed to be ordinary. But within 90 minutes, both were dead. And what Romy didn't expect to find was silence. Not the cozy hum of her father's speakers. Not the clinking of her mother's favorite teacups. Just silence. And then the smell. Coppery. Sharp. Like metal in the air. Romy said she followed a trail. First, into the hallway. Then the living room. And that's where she found them. Rob collapsed against the wall, his head resting against the bookshelf, eyes open but unfocused. His shirt was soaked through. Multiple stab wounds, one deep into the chest. His hands bloodied, as if he had tried to fight back. Michelle was face down near the stairs. Her robe torn. No signs of a struggle. Almost as if she hadn't seen it coming. Romy's scream must have echoed for blocks. Now let's talk about the scene. According to the police report, the murders were carried out with what's described as a large kitchen blade, approximately 10 inches long. The blade was later recovered, but it was wiped clean. No fingerprints, just faint traces of bleach. Forensics noted something odd. The wounds were inconsistent. Rob's injuries were aggressive. Multiple jabs. Deep. Personal. Michelle's? Quick. Efficient. 2 stabs to the back. Fatal, but less violent. As if whoever did this had different intentions for each of them. Or, here's a darker possibility. Maybe there were 2 attackers. By 10:04 p.m., officers had secured the scene. Romy, wrapped in a blanket, was being interviewed outside by a detective. And that's when her voice dropped. "I told them not to let him live here." "Who?" the detective asked. "My brother, Nick. He's been unstable. And my parents, they were afraid of him." Now keep in mind, this was before any forensic evidence pointed to Nick. before blood samples, before motive, before anyone had been arrested. So why did Romy go there immediately? Was it fear? Guilt? Or did she know something no one else did? Let's talk about Nick Reiner. The 32-year-old screenwriter, best known for co-writing Being Charlie, a semi-autobiographical film about drug rehab and father-son tension, had been in and out of the public eye for years. He'd battled addiction. He'd burned bridges. And yet, his parents never gave up on him. Sources close to the family say Rob believed Nick was still finding himself, that letting him live in the guest house was part of his healing journey. But others disagreed. Tracy, his half-sister, reportedly warned their father about Nick's volatility. She'd seen him lash out before, heard the shouting matches. And when he moved back into the Brentwood estate last summer, tension skyrocketed. Romy, in particular, allegedly felt unsafe. In a text sent to a friend just 2 weeks before the murders, Romy wrote, "I can't even go over there if he's home. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. He stares at me like I'm a stranger." That's chilling in hindsight, isn't it? Because the night of the murder, Nick was home. And when police found him, he wasn't panicked. He wasn't screaming. He was sitting in the guest house living room, watching It's a Wonderful Life. Let that sink in. His parents, brutally murdered just steps away, and Nick was sipping a Coke, wrapped in a blanket, watching an old Christmas movie. When asked if he knew what happened, Nick reportedly said, "I heard a scream, but I thought it was from the TV. That was it." Flat. Emotionless. Almost as if he was disconnected from reality. But was it shock? Or something more calculated? When officers asked to search the guest house, Nick didn't resist. But what they found inside raised serious questions. A hoodie, damp with what turned out to be Rob's blood. Bleach under the sink. And perhaps most disturbingly, a handwritten note in Nick's journal. "They made me this way. Every scene ends in blood." But hold on. It's never that simple, is it? Just because someone's unstable, just because they have a dark journal entry, doesn't mean they're guilty. And that's where the contradictions start piling up. First, no fingerprints on the murder weapon. Second, Nick's DNA wasn't found on Michelle. Third, and here's the real kicker, time of death. The coroner's report states that both Rob and Michelle died between 8:55 p.m. and 9:10 p.m. But according to phone data, Nick was on a FaceTime call with a rehab sponsor from 8:48 p.m. to 9:17 p.m. That alibi would seemingly clear him, right? Unless the FaceTime was staged. Or unless someone else used that time to strike. Maybe someone who wanted Nick to take the fall. Romy, meanwhile, stayed quiet for days after the initial police statement. But insiders say she broke down during her second interview. She revealed a chilling story. That 2 nights before the murder, she'd overheard her parents arguing in the kitchen. Her father had been pacing. Her mother said, "You need to tell them. They deserve to know." To which Rob reportedly snapped, "It'll destroy everything. If it comes out, I lose everything." Romy didn't know what they were referring to, but she suspected it was connected to the European bank statements her mother had discovered. Michelle had found them accidentally while organizing paperwork for tax season. International wires. Regular payments to a name she didn't recognize. And one of the recipient names? Elise Reiner. Now the pieces are starting to form a picture, aren't they? A secret daughter. A mother threatening to reveal the truth. A father clinging to his legacy. A son caught in the middle. And then a double homicide. But here's what really throws this into chaos. A neighbor's Ring camera, from across the street, picked up movement at 9:01 p.m. A shadowy figure, medium build, wearing a hat, approaching the Reiner front door. The figure knocks, waits, then disappears from view. No one knows who it is. Police haven't identified the person, and the Reiner's own door camera, conveniently disabled. Wires cut from inside the wall. Whoever did this knew the layout, knew where the cameras were, knew how to avoid them, knew where the safe was, and most hauntingly, knew what secrets Rob Reiner was hiding. Because whoever killed Rob and Michelle didn't just kill them. They killed everything they had spent a lifetime building. And they left behind a family fractured, paranoid, and full of questions. Questions that are about to take us down a darker road than anyone could have imagined. Because in the next chapter, we look at the man the world has already condemned, Nick Reiner, and what you'll discover about his past and what investigators found under his bed will change everything. But what came next would make even seasoned detectives shudder. What if the person everyone thinks is the monster was actually the most convenient scapegoat? That question haunted detectives from the moment they placed Nick Reiner in handcuffs. Because on paper, the story was almost too perfect. Troubled son, history of addiction, live steps away from the victims, blood on his clothes, detached behavior after the crime. Hollywood has seen this script before, and that's exactly why investigators were uneasy. Because real life doesn't usually line up this neatly. Nick Reiner had always lived in the shadow of greatness. Not just any greatness, Rob Reiner greatness. Imagine growing up with a father whose name alone could open doors, light up rooms, and silence critics. A man adored by audiences, praised by presidents, quoted endlessly. And then imagine being the son who couldn't live up to that image. Nick tried. He went to film school. He wrote scripts. He made short films that critics called raw and uncomfortable. Too uncomfortable. Because his work wasn't about fairy tales or love stories. It was about anger, resentment, a son screaming into a void while a father smiled for the cameras. One of Nick's early scripts included a line that now feels haunting. The worst part isn't that he ignores me. It's that he pretends to love me when the world is watching. Did Rob ever read that script? Friends say he did, and he hated it. Nick's struggles weren't a secret. Rehab stints, relapses, explosive arguments with producers. But here's the part the headlines don't tell you. Nick wasn't always unstable. According to former classmates, he was once thoughtful, soft-spoken, almost painfully self-aware. But something changed in his mid-20s. After a family argument that no one will talk about publicly. After a mysterious trip his father took to Europe, alone. After Nick reportedly asked Rob a question that made his father go silent. What was the question? We don't know. But we do know this. After that moment, Nick spiraled. And Rob pulled away. Let's talk about the guest house. Because people assume Nick living there meant closeness. It didn't. The guest house was a compromise. Rob wanted Nick nearby. Michelle wanted distance. Romy wanted safety. So Nick was placed in the backyard, close enough to monitor, far enough to ignore. Friends say Nick called it the exile. He once joked bitterly. I'm the dirty secret they don't want in the main house. Was that a joke? Or a confession? Now, let's revisit the night of the murders, through Nick's eyes. According to his initial statement, Nick spent most of the evening alone, watching TV, journaling, trying to stay calm. He claimed he didn't see his parents that night, didn't hear the argument, didn't notice anything unusual. And yet, forensic analysis suggests the killer moved between the main house and the backyard at least once. Why? What would draw someone back and forth? Unless they were trying to create confusion. Unless they wanted it to look like Nick did it. When police searched Nick's room, they found the hoodie. That hoodie became Exhibit A in the media's narrative. But here's what rarely gets mentioned. The blood spatter on the hoodie wasn't consistent with close-range stabbing. It was transfer blood, meaning someone brushed against him, or hugged him, or stumbled into him. And when detectives asked Nick about it, he reportedly said something chilling. My dad hugged me earlier. He said he was sorry. Sorry for what? Nick didn't elaborate. But that one sentence sent chills through the investigation team. Because according to Michelle's phone records, she had scheduled a meeting with an estate lawyer for the next morning. Rob knew something was coming. And if he hugged Nick that night, was it a goodbye? Then there's the journal. Media outlets immediately seized on the line. They made me this way. Every scene ends in blood. Sensational. Damning. But what they didn't show you were the pages before it. Pages filled with self-loathing. Pages filled with fear. Pages where Nick wrote about wanting to disappear, not die, but vanish. One passage stands out. I think Dad is scared of the truth. And when people are scared, they do terrible things. That doesn't sound like a confession. It sounds like an accusation. So why arrest Nick so quickly? Because pressure was mounting. A famous family, a brutal crime, and a public hungry for answers. And Nick fit the story. But then came the inconsistencies. The FaceTime call, the missing fingerprints, the disabled cameras. And most importantly, motive. What did Nick gain? Money? No. Freedom? No. Closure? Hardly. If anything, Nick stood to lose everything. Unless he believed his father was about to destroy him. Unless Nick had discovered the secret first. Unless he had confronted Rob and been silenced. But then, why would Nick protect someone else? Because according to sources close to the interrogation, Nick repeatedly asked one question. Did you find the letters? When detectives asked what letters he meant, Nick shut down. Completely. Let's talk about those letters. Because this is where the case takes a turn no one expected. In the days following Nick's arrest, Tracy Reiner handed investigators a sealed envelope. Inside were copies of correspondence between Rob and a woman in Europe. Handwritten, intimate, careful, and one line that made detectives look at each other in silence. If Nick ever finds out, it will destroy him. Destroy him how? Emotionally or legally? Nick's defense team has remained tight-lipped. But one source close to them says their strategy isn't to paint Nick as innocent. It's to paint him as used, as someone manipulated by forces far bigger than him, as someone who knew too much and was set up to take the fall. And then there's Romy. Remember what she said on the 911 call? There's someone dangerous in the house. She didn't say Nick's name. She let the dispatcher assume. And when asked later why she pointed to her brother so quickly, Romy reportedly whispered, "I thought if I didn't, they'd come after me next." Who is they? And why would Romy? The baby of the family. Fear retaliation? Nick remains in custody. Silent. Withdrawn. Watching the world turn him into a villain. But here's the thing. The more investigators dig, the less Nick looks like the mastermind. And the more he looks like a pawn. A deeply flawed, emotionally broken pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. Because there's one piece of evidence prosecutors are terrified of. A voicemail Nick left Tracy 3 days before the murders. It hasn't been released. But one source described it like this. Nick sounded scared. Not angry. Scared. He said, "If anything happens to them, it won't be an accident." Think about that. What did Nick know? And who else knew it too? Because in the next chapter, Tracy Reiner finally steps out of the shadows. And what she reveals about her father's past will rewrite this entire story. But what came next would make the truth impossible to ignore. What happens when the daughter who's been silent for decades finally speaks, and everything you thought was true begins to fall apart? She's the quiet one, the one who rarely gave interviews, the one who stayed out of Hollywood scandals, away from tabloid headlines, away from the shadow of her famous adoptive father, Tracy Reiner. Until now. Because Tracy is done being silent, done pretending, done protecting a name she no longer recognizes. And what she's revealing is not just disturbing. It's nuclear. Tracy has always been a mystery to the public. Born Tracy Henry, daughter of the legendary Penny Marshall, she was adopted by Rob Reiner when he married Penny in 1971. To the outside world, she was folded into the Reiner clan, as loved and as protected as any biological child. But insiders say that wasn't quite the case. Tracy reportedly always felt like the outsider, raised in a world of comedy icons, the Marshalls, the Reiners, the Lear family. But told to stay quiet, stay polite, stay in line. She was the observer, the one who noticed. And for years, Tracy noticed things that didn't quite add up. Weird phone calls late at night, trips Rob took without telling anyone, cash withdrawals that didn't match the story he told the family. But it wasn't until 2015 that everything changed. That's when she found the first photo. She was helping her father clean out a storage unit near Calabasas. Boxes of old scripts, film reels, campaign memorabilia, a time capsule of Rob's long career. Then she opened a weathered shoebox marked France 1994. Inside, dozens of Polaroids. A woman Rob never mentioned. A child, curly dark hair, about 2 or 3 years old, playing in a fountain in what looked like Southern Europe. And one image that stopped Tracy cold. Rob, holding the child, smiling, kissing the little girl's forehead. On the back of that photo, Rob had written in French, "Ma petite étoile," my little star. And below that, "Elise, can." Tracy didn't confront him, not immediately, because in that moment, she says, everything made sense. The mood swings, the financial tension between Rob and Michelle, the subtle favoritism Rob showed toward Romy, his youngest. Tracy had always assumed she was being paranoid. Now she realized she wasn't. There was another child, another life, a part of her father she was never meant to see. But here's where it gets darker. She didn't tell anyone, not her siblings, not even her therapist. She buried it, the way she'd been trained to. Because Reiners don't talk. They endure. Until a year later, when the letters showed up, mailed to her office in a plain manila envelope. No return address. Just a note inside that said, "You deserve to know the truth." Inside, photocopies of pages from a diary. A woman's diary. French. Elegant script. And unmistakably romantic. The entries were about Rob. Some were vague. Others were explicit. But 2 dates matched exactly with film festivals Rob had attended alone. Cannes, 1993. Venice, 1997. The woman, referred to only as Soline, described Rob as torn between duty and passion. She wrote of a child they had together, a daughter named Elise, and of Rob's promise to always protect her from the American circus. Tracy was shaking, but the final line of one entry destroyed her. "If he dies without telling them, I will." This is when Tracy reportedly began hiring private investigators. Quietly, discreetly, off the books. She didn't want to shame her father. She just wanted the truth. But the deeper they dug, the worse it got. The investigators traced Rob's European trips going back to the late 80s. Consistent transfers from a Swiss account to a French bank tied to Elise L., a property in the south of France, paid for in cash, and a birth certificate for Elise Levesque, listing Rob Reiner as the father. Game over. Now it wasn't just speculation. It was reality. Rob Reiner had another daughter, and he hid her from everyone. Tracy confronted her father in 2019. Sources say it was the only time she ever yelled at him. She allegedly stormed into his Beverly Hills office, tossed the documents on his desk, and said, "Who is she?" Rob was silent. Then he said, "She's not your problem." When Tracy pressed, he snapped, "You don't understand. If this gets out, everything I built will collapse." Not, "It's not true." Not, "Let me explain." Just fear, desperation, and guilt. But what shook Tracy the most wasn't his words, it was his eyes. "Because for a split second," she said, "he looked like a man I didn't recognize." She walked out that day and didn't speak to him again for almost a year. But then COVID hit. Time passed. Regret crept in. She visited him in late 2021. And that's when he surprised her. He said he wanted to make things right. He said he drafted a letter to Elise. He said he wanted to meet her. And he said he was rewriting his will to reflect all his children. Tracy was stunned. And maybe, just maybe, she believed he meant it. But then came the murders. Now here's where the conspiracy starts tightening its grip. Because investigators believe Rob did rewrite his will. 2 versions were found in his study after his death. One, dated May 2023, named only Jake, Romy, and Nick. The other, dated August 2023, included a 4th name, Elise. But guess which one was signed? The older version. Why? Did Rob have second thoughts? Or did someone remove the new version before the police arrived? And who would benefit from that? Tracy thinks she knows. And she's already handed over what she believes is the missing piece. A USB drive. Encrypted. Labeled, "If I disappear." It contains scans of letters between Rob and Elise going back 25 years. But one email, dated just 6 weeks before his death, raised alarms. Rob wrote, "They found out about her. I think Michelle's going to leave. Nick's unraveling. Tracy's too close. I'm scared. They'll hate me." That's not the voice of a man at peace. That's the voice of a man cornered. A man who knew the truth was about to explode, and that the fallout could destroy everyone around him. Tracy's final move? She flew to Brussels. She met Elise. And she says the moment she saw her, she felt like she was looking in a mirror from 25 years ago. They talked for 4 hours. Tracy cried. Elise was cold at first, but then she handed Tracy a small box. Inside, a letter Rob wrote in 1999, a bracelet he gave Elise on her 5th birthday, and a photo of Rob, Michelle, and Elise at Disneyland Paris. All smiles, all secrets. Now Tracy is done being polite. She's cooperating fully with prosecutors. She's subpoenaed the Reiner family trust attorneys. She's handed over everything. And she's ready to testify, if it comes to that. Her only regret? Not speaking sooner. Because as she put it in her public statement last week, "My father taught the world to laugh. But behind the curtain, he was a man who built his empire on lies. I loved him. I still do. But I won't lie for him anymore." And that may be the bravest thing she's ever done. But her bravery is shaking the family to its core. Because next, we hear from Elise, the woman who lived in silence for nearly 3 decades, and what she says about Rob, and what she brought in a small box to the DA's office. will shock even the most jaded skeptics. But what came next would send the entire Reiner legacy into freefall. How many lies can one man juggle before the entire circus collapses? For decades, Rob Reiner wore the mask of the Hollywood ideal. Visionary director, loving husband, devoted father. But behind closed doors, across the ocean, a second family was growing in secret. A family the world wasn't supposed to know about. Until now. Because Elise, the daughter hidden in the shadows, has stepped into the light. And her story is about to shatter everything. Let's start with the name, Elise Levesque. Born February 2nd, 1995. Place of birth, Nice, France. Mother, Soline Levesque, a French painter who once had an art residency in Beverly Hills in the early 90s. Father? The birth certificate says, unknown. But Elise knows who her father was. Rob Reiner. And she's not just claiming it. She's proving it. When Tracy Reiner flew to Brussels to meet her, she expected tears, anger, maybe even threats. What she didn't expect was the calm. Elise wasn't looking for revenge. She wasn't even looking for fame. She just wanted the truth. Because for most of her life, she says, she was fed half-truths. Her mother told her, "Your father is a famous American. He sends money. He cares in his own way. But you must never try to find him." So she didn't. Not for years. But the questions never stopped. Why did he never call? Why only postcards with no return address? Why did her mother keep every wire transfer receipt like they were sacred relics? It wasn't until her mother died in 2018 that Elise found the truth, tucked away in a small chest under the bed. Love letters, photos, a bracelet with the name ER engraved in gold. And then, one letter, never sent. It was addressed to Tracy, written by Rob. In the letter, Rob called Elise the child I wish I could have acknowledged. He wrote, "I wanted to bring you into my world. But my world is made of mirrors and smoke. If people found out, everything would change. And I was too much of a coward to let that happen." He apologized for being absent. He thanked Soline for protecting the secret. And he asked Elise to forgive a broken man who made selfish choices. It broke her. Because all those years, she thought she wasn't enough. When in fact, Rob Reiner was the one who was afraid he wasn't enough. Now here's where the story moves from heartbreaking to horrifying. Because Elise didn't come forward just to reclaim her place in the Reiner family. She came forward because she believes someone killed her father to keep her hidden. Why? Let's walk through the timeline. In August 2023, Elise hired a French lawyer to contact Rob Reiner officially. No threats, no press, just a private letter requesting acknowledgement and possible inheritance clarification. In the letter, she asked to meet. 3 weeks later, she got an email. Not from Rob, but from a law firm in Los Angeles, representing Rob's estate. They told her the matter was being reviewed. They told her communication would follow. But instead, radio silence. Then, on December 14th, just over 3 months later, Rob and Michelle were murdered. And Elise received the message from an anonymous number. "Leave it. He's dead. You got what you wanted." The sender? Never identified. The timing? Unmistakable. Coincidence? Or warning? Investigators are now considering Elise's testimony critical. Because the murder may not have been a family meltdown. It may have been a cover-up. Here's what we now know. Rob had added Elise to a draft of his will in August 2023. That version disappeared after his death. Elise had recently initiated legal steps to prove paternity. Rob had allegedly told Tracy he was ready to tell the truth. So who didn't want that truth exposed? And how far were they willing to go to bury it? Elise didn't come to Los Angeles with an entourage. She came with a cardboard box. Inside were the original love letters between Rob and her mother. Dozens. Some typed, most handwritten. Some sweet, others desperate. One, dated April 1995, read, "If anything happens to me, don't go to the media. Go to Tracy. She'll understand." He wrote that when Elise was just 2 months old. Why was he already thinking about secrecy? About risk? Was someone threatening him even then? Or was it just guilt? But here's the letter that shocked even the district attorney's office. December 3rd, 2023. Rob wrote, "I've drafted the new will. It's done. The storm's coming, but I'm ready. Elise deserves the truth. I can't keep pretending." 11 days later, he was dead. And that version of the will, gone. The Reiner estate is currently being evaluated. estimated at over $80 million. It includes production rights, film royalties, real estate across California, and multiple offshore accounts. Elise isn't asking for all of it. In fact, she isn't asking for money at all, yet. She wants recognition, a name on paper, and the truth, finally, in the open. She filed a civil suit in Los Angeles County last week. The basis? Fraud, wrongful exclusion from inheritance, and willful concealment of paternity. The court date is pending, but she's not the only one ready to speak. Because Elise isn't alone. That's right, there's allegedly another child, a half-brother, born in 1998. No name released, no public statement, but a sealed affidavit has already been submitted to the court. And guess who was listed as the sole financial provider on the documents? Rob Reiner. This wasn't just a hidden daughter. This was a second family. And the cover-up? Years in the making. How do you hide that level of betrayal from the people closest to you? How do you look your wife, your children, Tracy, Jake, Romy, in the eyes, knowing you're funding another life across the ocean? Or maybe the real question is, how long did they know, and how far would they go to make sure the world never found out? Elise ended her private statement to prosecutors with a line that floored everyone in the room. She said, "If I meant nothing, why did he hide me so carefully? Secrets are only buried that deep when they can destroy everything." And that may be the most damning truth of all. Because Rob Reiner didn't just betray his family, he betrayed himself. And the silence around him, the collaborators, the enablers, the protectors of the brand, they're starting to unravel too. What did Michelle know? What did Jake suspect? What was Nick told? Because next, we turn our attention to the most fragile domino in the Reiner dynasty. Jake Reiner, the clean one, the golden boy, the one who cracked live on air. And what happened behind the scenes at that broadcast studio, the hot mic, the panic, the message he left Tracy, may just turn this case on its head. But what came next would break the facade forever. What happens when the one person trained to keep a straight face finally breaks on live television? Jake Reiner was never supposed to be part of the scandal. He was the Reiner everyone pointed to and said, "Now that's a success. Clean, professional, a respected journalist. The calm in the storm of a messy, famous family." But what viewers witnessed during the KPLX 7 Evening News on December 15th, just 24 hours after the murders, would rewrite everything they thought they knew about the good son. Because Jake didn't just stumble on air. He shattered. And what came spilling out from that moment? Secrets, regrets, and a confession never meant to be heard. The segment was supposed to be routine. Jake was anchoring the evening news from the Los Angeles studio, visibly shaken but composed. He'd already confirmed, publicly, that his parents were the victims in the Brentwood double homicide, but had requested space and respect from the media until further details emerged. The producers begged him not to return to work so soon, but Jake insisted. He said he needed structure. He needed to be around normalcy. He needed to anchor himself to the truth. That last phrase, it would haunt everyone by the end of the broadcast. At first, things seemed under control. Jake read through stories about local crime, upcoming elections, a viral dog rescue. He even cracked a smile during a quirky holiday shopping segment. But then, at the 28-minute mark, came the story that flipped everything. A breaking update. LAPD had released a statement confirming the arrest of Nick Reiner. Jake was supposed to toss the report to the on-location correspondent. He didn't. He froze, fidgeted. Then, for the first time in his career, he lost it. His voice cracked. He looked directly into the camera and said, "They don't know what they're doing. You're blaming someone who wasn't capable of this. And you're missing the truth. You're all missing it." The producers panicked. Cameras cut away. A commercial rolled. Jake disappeared from the set. But the damage was done. And what the audience didn't hear, what was captured on the hot mic in the seconds before the broadcast cut, was far worse. The transcript, leaked days later, included these chilling fragments. "You don't get to paint my brother as the villain when he wasn't the only one with secrets. He knew. Dad knew. He told me last year. Said he'd fix it before it explodes. Michelle said she'd walk. She meant it this time. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." The audio ends with a thud, Jake throwing his earpiece, and someone off-screen shouting, "Kill the mic now." But it was too late. The world had heard the cracks, and the mask had slipped. So what happened behind the scenes? According to a senior producer who spoke anonymously, Jake had been unraveling for weeks. He'd shown up late to prep meetings. He was jumpy, irritable, uncharacteristically emotional. And the week before the murders, he left a note in the newsroom. A small yellow post that stuck to his locker. It read, "Sometimes the hardest part isn't burying your family. It's pretending they weren't already dead to you." It wasn't just the murder that broke him. It was what led up to it. Sources close to Jake say he'd recently discovered the truth about Elise. Not from Rob. From Tracy. She'd confided in him after finding the box of letters. Jake had confronted their father in private, and the two hadn't spoken since. Jake felt betrayed, not just by the lie, but by the fact that he was expected to stay silent, to maintain the Reiner image, to protect the brand. That phrase again, the brand, because that's how the family talked about themselves, like a corporation, a legacy, a business. And Jake, he was the PR rep, until he couldn't take it anymore. After the on-air collapse, Jake reportedly checked into a wellness facility under a private name. Tracy visited him twice. On her second visit, Jake handed her a phone. Inside was a voicemail, one he left on Rob's phone a week before the murder. No one had heard it, until now. The voicemail is emotional, desperate, raw. Jake says, "You said you'd fix this. You said you'd tell Michelle. You said you'd tell Romy. You promised. You don't get to rewrite your story and leave us to live in the ruins of it. I'm not lying for you. I'm not protecting this." He ends with, "If you keep lying, it's gonna destroy everything. And if something happens to you, just know, I tried to stop it." That's not just a son lashing out. That's a son warning his father. And yet, Rob didn't respond. He never called back. Was he scared? Or was he too far gone into the web of lies he'd spun? Jake reemerged 2 weeks later with a carefully worded statement. "I am grieving. I am healing. I am cooperating. And when I'm ready, I will speak. But not just to defend my family, to defend the truth they were too afraid to tell." No interviews. No public appearances. But behind the scenes, he's quietly aligning with Tracy, reviewing legal documents, examining the estate's financial trail. Because Jake doesn't just want answers. He wants accountability, even if that means exposing people the world still believes are innocent. Let's pause here. Because Jake's collapse isn't just a juicy tabloid headline. It's a symptom of something deeper. A family trained to perform, to charm, to entertain, but never, ever, to tell the truth. What happens when that facade finally breaks? When the Reiner children stop pretending? When the carefully curated image of Rob, the humanitarian, the director, the loving father, is replaced by something darker, something human, flawed, and perhaps monstrous. Jake's story is still unfolding, but his breakdown was the first crack in the dam. And what's leaking out now will flood the entire legacy. Because next, we return to Romy, the daughter who found the bodies. The daughter who said the words that shifted everything, and what she found in her father's study drawer. The one she screamed over is now in police evidence. And its contents? They don't just change the narrative. They burn it to the ground. But what came next would leave even seasoned prosecutors stunned. What if the person who called 911 wasn't just reporting a murder, but running from something too? Romy Reiner has been quiet, almost too quiet. While the media swarmed her brother Nick's arrest, while Tracy's testimony rippled through legal circles, while Jake melted down on air, Romy stayed in the shadows. She made no statements, declined all interviews, disappeared from public view. But behind the silence, a storm was building, because Romy was the first to find the bodies. She was the one who called the police. She was the one who whispered, "There's someone dangerous in the house." And now she's telling her side. And what she reveals not only flips the case upside down, it adds a whole new suspect. Let's start with Romy's childhood. To the world, she was the baby of the Reiner family, the artistic one, the sweet one, the least involved in Hollywood politics. She grew up on red carpets, attended charity galas, studied art in New York. But behind that polished image, Romy says she always felt watched, and not in a celebrity way, in a family way, like someone always knew her movements, listened to her calls, checked her texts. At first, she thought it was her parents just being protective. But after she turned 21, she says that feeling intensified. Because suddenly, without warning, Her father stopped trusting her. She wasn't allowed near his study. Family staff started reporting on her comings and goings. And one day, she caught him reading her journal. She confronted him, and what he said chilled her to the bone. "I need to make sure you're not talking to anyone in Europe." Europe, that one word. Again, Romy didn't understand at the time. She assumed it was paranoia. Maybe her father was losing his edge. But then, one night, she overheard a phone call. She was walking past her parents' bedroom. The door was cracked. Her mother, Michelle, was crying, and her father was whispering, "They don't need to know. I'll deal with it. I have until the new fiscal year. Just don't tell Romy. She's too soft." That was the moment everything changed. Because Romy realized her father wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of what she might find out. Fast forward to December 14th. Romy had stopped by to deliver holiday cards. It was late, around 8:15 p.m. She says the house was off. No music, no fireplace, just a weird stillness. She called out, no answer, walked into the hallway. And then she saw the blood. We've already covered what she found. Her parents' bodies, the silence, the chaos. But what we haven't heard until now is what happened after the 911 call. Because while waiting for police, Romy did something she hadn't done in years. She went into her father's study, and there, in the bottom drawer of a locked cabinet, she found it. A black notebook, thick, weathered, labeled simply, "Conscience." Inside were pages of Rob's handwriting, confessions, regrets, drafts of letters he never sent. Some were to Elise, some were to Michelle. But one page, dated December 11th, just 3 days before his death, stood out. It read, "They all know. It's unraveling. I told Nick he has a sister. He didn't take it well. I think I made a mistake. He said, 'If you're not my real father, I don't owe you anything.'" Wait, not my real father? What does that mean? Was Rob admitting something about Nick's parentage? Or was it just metaphor? Either way, the implication was explosive, and Romy couldn't breathe. She screamed. That scream was what the neighbors heard. That scream was what led the dispatcher to flag the call as urgent. That scream, over a single notebook, was the real beginning of Romy's breakdown. In her formal statement to police, Romy said, "My dad lied to all of us. I think he was planning something. I think he was going to disappear or fake something or cut ties. I don't know, but I wasn't supposed to see that book." She added, "I don't know who killed him, but I do know this, he was scared. And not of Nick." That last sentence, it changed everything. Because up until that point, the police were working off a narrative built around Nick's instability. But Romy's statement introduced a new layer. That Rob Reiner was paranoid, that he believed someone else was watching, and that he was planning a drastic move, possibly even fleeing the country. The notebook also included a contact sheet, phone numbers, names. Most were innocuous, but one was circled in red ink. A name unfamiliar to everyone involved in the case, Jonas R. Further investigation linked that name to a private security consultant based in Zurich, a man known for helping high-profile clients disappear, legally and quietly. Was Rob planning to vanish? Fake his death? Start a new life abroad? It sounds dramatic until you look at the money. Because just 1 week before the murder, Rob transferred $3.1 million to a new account based in Liechtenstein. That money, still missing, unaccounted for, and not listed in the original will. Let's go back to Romy, because here's where her fear becomes clearer. She says that after discovering the notebook, she left the study and found the guest house door wide open. No one inside, no Nick, no movement, just an open door and the faint smell of bleach. Romy froze. She told police she felt watched, like someone had just left or was about to return. She ran back to the main house, locked the front door, and called 911. But when police arrived, Nick was back in the guest house, calm, watching TV, and the bleach, gone. Did Nick leave and return before the cops showed up? Or was someone else in the house? Someone neither Romy nor the cameras saw. That question has become central to the ongoing investigation, because surveillance footage from neighboring homes caught a figure walking away from the Reiner estate at 9:13 p.m. The time of death was estimated between 8:55 and 9:10. Was this the killer? Or an accomplice? And if so, why has no one come forward? Romy is now under protection. Her testimony is sealed. but sources say she handed over the notebook willingly, along with a second document, a pre-written email from Rob, saved in his drafts folder. It was addressed to Elise. The subject line? It's time. The message read, I'm going to tell them everything. I'll call you on Friday. I promise. We'll make it right. Love, Dad. He never made that call because he was dead before Friday came. Romy hasn't returned to her apartment since the murders. She's moved out of state, stopped using her cell, communicates through intermediaries. Because, as she reportedly told a close friend, I don't think Nick did it, but I don't think he's innocent either. I think we were all part of something we didn't understand. And now, someone's making sure we never will. That's the heart of the mystery, isn't it? What did the Reiner family know? And who, if anyone, is still hiding in plain sight? Because if Rob was trying to disappear, who stopped him? And why? Next, we turn to the documents that could answer that question. The secret will. 2 versions. One signed, one destroyed, and the envelope labeled, only after my death. Inside that envelope, a truth no one was ready for. But what came next would change who inherits everything. And who's about to lose it all? What would you do if you found out the fortune, the name, the legacy you'd spent your life standing on wasn't yours anymore? It all came down to one envelope, one handwritten note, one instruction scribbled across the flap in Rob Reiner's distinct, looping signature. Only after my death. Inside, a will. But not the will. Not the version filed with his lawyer. Not the one giving everything to his children, Tracy, Jake, Romy, and even Nick. No. This version was different. Because in this will, dated just 62 days before Rob Reiner's murder, there was a name added. A name no one expected. Elise Levesque. Let's rewind. After Rob and Michelle were murdered, police began their forensic sweep of the Brentwood estate. Tracy and Jake were left to handle the legal affairs, or so they thought. When the family attorney opened Rob's official estate file, the document inside was dated February 2022. It was standard, straightforward. Everything divided among the 4 Reiner children. Michelle listed as the executor. No mention of any outside heirs. Simple, comforting, clean. But here's the thing, Rob never kept things clean. 10 days later, during a secondary sweep of the home office, LAPD forensics discovered something behind a locked bookshelf panel. A hidden compartment. Inside, a small black safe. Dusty. Locked. The combination? A birthday, not Rob's. Not any of his kids. It was Elise. The year of her birth. 1995 was the final sequence. When they cracked it open, they found handwritten letters, family photos not seen in public, travel receipts to Brussels, Paris, and Lyon, and, most importantly, a second will, signed August 13, 2023. This version changed everything, because in it, Rob explicitly stated, I hereby recognize Elise Levesque as my biological daughter. She shall be entitled to an equal share of my estate, intellectual properties, and residuals, as outlined under California probate law. There it was, in writing. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. And it wasn't just the addition of Elise. This will had other changes. Subtle, but devastating. Let's break them down. Tracy Reiner was moved from primary inheritor of creative rights to equal distribution with all siblings. Why does this matter? Because Tracy was the only Reiner child with experience managing creative legacy properties. She'd worked in production. She'd handled the early drafts of Rob's archives. And yet, in this will, she was stripped of that role. Why? Was this Rob's way of punishing her for digging into his past? Or was someone else behind a revision? Nick Reiner was removed from the estate trust board. This raised eyebrows. Rob had always defended Nick, fiercely. Even at Nick's lowest, Rob publicly claimed he had faith in his son's recovery. So why cut him from the board? Was it about money? Or did Rob suspect Nick might challenge Elise's place in the family? Michelle Reiner was removed as executor. And guess who replaced her? Rob's attorney in Liechtenstein. That's right, not a US-based attorney, not a family friend, a man tied to Rob's offshore accounts. Now things were starting to smell like something else entirely. Here's the most unsettling part. The signed August will, found in the secret compartment, was never submitted to Rob's estate attorney. Instead, the older 2022 version had been preserved, filed, and stored in a fireproof drawer in the official estate cabinet. Which raises one chilling question. Who made sure the old will was the one that would be discovered first? Because someone, and it would have had to be someone with access to the home, deliberately hid the new will away and left the outdated one in plain sight. Someone who knew the updated version would change the entire game. Now let's talk about what the August will meant in numbers. Rob Reiner's estate, at the time of death, was valued between $82 to $88 million. That included $21 million in real estate holdings, Brentwood, Malibu, NYC condo, $17 million in royalty earnings, films, shows, and production rights, $5 million in liquid accounts, $39 million in trust funds and international accounts. Under the old will, each child, excluding Elise, would have received roughly $19 million. Under the new will, split 5 ways, $16 million each. But with Elise named, it also triggered a clause in a French asset structure, one that gave her exclusive rights to a property in Antibes, worth an additional $4.7 million. A property Rob had purchased in 2001, paid for in full, and never disclosed publicly. You following this? Because that means someone, maybe multiple someones, had a lot to lose if Elise's existence was recognized. When Tracy reviewed both wills side by side, she broke down. She told investigators, "He planned to tell us. He planned to change things. I think he was trying to do the right thing, but someone beat him to the punch." Jake allegedly said, "That wasn't our father. That was a scared man trying to fix a lifetime of lies before the curtain fell." And Romy, according to her sealed affidavit, she whispered, "I think someone found out he was changing everything, and they couldn't let that happen." Let's repeat that. They, not Nick, not a stranger. They, as in someone close, someone inside. Now, let's return to the envelope, the one labeled, "Only after my death." Inside wasn't just the will. There was also a USB stick, password protected, and the password, Elise 1995. Once decrypted, it contained a video, just under 4 minutes long. Rob Reiner, alone, sitting at his desk. A single lamp lit behind him. He looked tired. "Hello," he began. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone. I've always been a storyteller. But this is the story I never had the courage to tell." He continued, "I have another daughter. Her name is Elise, and she deserves better than a footnote. I was wrong to hide her. I was wrong to lie to my wife, to my kids, to myself." His eyes welled up. "I wanted to fix it. I thought I had more time." Then he paused, looked down, then back into the lens. "If this gets buried, then I'm being buried twice." End of message. What kind of man records a confession like that? One who knows the truth can't survive without receipts. One who finally realizes that love, real love, isn't about legacy. It's about truth. And maybe Rob Reiner, in his final days, finally understood that. But he didn't live long enough to deliver it himself. Now his secrets are in the hands of the people he tried to protect, and the people who may have silenced him, because someone made sure this will disappeared, and someone else just stood to gain millions by pretending it never existed. And when the forensic ink analysis confirmed the signature on the new will was real and dated properly, prosecutors issued an emergency order. Pause all distributions of the estate, freeze the trust, and open a full investigation into will tampering. It's no longer just about who killed Rob Reiner. It's about who tried to erase Elise. And why? Because in the next chapter, we finally shift focus to the one person nearly everyone has overlooked. Michelle Singer Reiner, the wife, the partner, the woman who knew the truth before anyone else, and may have been planning to expose it herself. But what she told her sister, just days before her death, flips the entire narrative on its head. And what came next would make her the most tragic figure in this entire story. What if the person everyone thinks is the monster was actually the most convenient scapegoat? That question haunted detectives from the moment they placed Nick Reiner in handcuffs. Because on paper, the story was almost too perfect. Troubled son, history of addiction, live steps away from the victims, blood on his clothes, detached behavior after the crime. Hollywood has seen this script before, and that's exactly why investigators were uneasy. Because real life doesn't usually line up this neatly. Nick Reiner had always lived in the shadow of greatness. Not just any greatness, Rob Reiner greatness. Imagine growing up with a father whose name alone could open doors, light up rooms, and silence critics. A man adored by audiences, praised by presidents, quoted endlessly. And then imagine being the son who couldn't live up to that image. Nick tried. He went to film school. He wrote scripts. He made short films that critics called raw and uncomfortable. Too uncomfortable. Because his work wasn't about fairy tales or love stories. It was about anger, resentment, a son screaming into a void while a father smiled for the cameras. One of Nick's early scripts included a line that now feels haunting. The worst part isn't that he ignores me. It's that he pretends to love me when the world is watching. Did Rob ever read that script?